Silver Oak Estates was the kind of neighborhood people dreamed about. Elegant brick homes lined quiet streets, shaded by towering oak trees. Children played safely in the parks, neighbors waved while walking their dogs, and perfectly landscaped lawns reflected the pride of homeowners who had worked for years to afford a place in the prestigious community. Real estate listings proudly advertised Silver Oak as one of the best-managed neighborhoods in the county. The brochures praised the Homeowners Association for maintaining high standards, protecting property values, and creating a strong sense of community. To outsiders, everything looked flawless. To those who had lived there long enough, appearances told only half the story. For nearly 12 years, the Silver Oak Homeowners Association had been led by board president Richard Holloway. Richard presented himself as a devoted community leader who volunteered countless hours to improve the neighborhood. Every newsletter featured his smiling photograph beside updates about beautification projects, security improvements, and community events. Most residents believed him. Few ever questioned how one man had remained in power for over a decade. Even fewer noticed something else. Nearly every major HOA contract somehow ended up benefiting people connected to Richard's family. The landscaping company belonged to his younger brother. The neighborhood security contract had recently been awarded to his nephew. The company responsible for repairing sidewalks was owned by his cousin. Even the annual holiday decorating contract had gone to his sister-in-law's event planning business. Each contract looked legitimate on paper. Every company submitted bids. Every vote passed unanimously. Yet somehow, Richard's relatives always won. The pattern continued year after year. Most homeowners never examined the financial reports closely enough to notice. Those who did often assumed the family simply happened to operate successful businesses. After all, no one could prove favoritism. Not yet. Into this neighborhood moved Michael Thompson. Michael had spent 25 years managing procurement and compliance for one of the nation's largest construction firms. His career revolved around one principle: fair competition. Every contract he approved required strict bidding procedures, independent evaluations, and complete transparency. Any appearance of favoritism triggered immediate review. After retiring, Michael and his wife Sarah purchased what they believed would be their forever home in Silver Oak Estates. Their daughter Olivia had recently started college, leaving the couple eager for a quieter chapter of life. Silver Oak seemed perfect. Friendly neighbors welcomed them. The streets were immaculate. The parks sparkled. Everything appeared exactly as promised. During their first month, Michael focused on settling into retirement. He planted flowers, introduced himself to neighbors, attended the community picnic. There he met Richard Holloway. Richard immediately made a strong impression. Confident, charismatic, always surrounded by other board members. He spoke passionately about preserving property values and maintaining neighborhood excellence. Residents applauded nearly everything he said. Michael admired the dedication, at least initially. A week later, the HOA mailed every homeowner its annual financial report. Unlike most residents, Michael actually read every page. Years of professional habit made it impossible not to. Within minutes, several numbers caught his attention. Landscaping expenses had increased nearly 40% over 3 years, despite no noticeable expansion of services. Security costs had doubled. Road maintenance spending exceeded nearby communities by almost 50%. Yet the neighborhood itself looked virtually unchanged. Michael wasn't accusing anyone of wrongdoing. He simply recognized unusual spending patterns. Curious, he searched county business records. The landscaping company, owned by Richard's brother. The security company, managed by Richard's nephew. The maintenance contractor, registered to Richard's cousin. Michael leaned back in his chair. Perhaps they truly offered the best services. Family businesses could absolutely win contracts fairly. But good governance required transparency whenever personal relationships existed. He searched the HOA meeting minutes. Every contract approval looked surprisingly brief. Conflict of interest disclosures appeared nowhere. Competitive bid evaluations were missing. Independent committee recommendations didn't exist. Everything seemed to move through the board with remarkable speed. Michael quietly mentioned his observations to Sarah during dinner. She encouraged caution. Retirement was supposed to bring peace, not investigations. Michael agreed. He had no intention of causing problems. He merely hoped to understand how the community operated. The following month, Silver Oak announced plans for a major clubhouse renovation. The estimated project budget exceeded $1 million. Homeowners would pay through a special assessment added to their annual dues. The amount surprised many residents. Questions immediately spread throughout the neighborhood. Why renovate a clubhouse already in excellent condition? Why spend so much money? At the next HOA meeting, homeowners filled nearly every chair. Richard confidently presented colorful architectural renderings showing luxury upgrades, expanded fitness facilities, and redesigned gathering spaces. The presentation impressed many people. Then came the contractor announcement. Without discussing competing proposals, Richard proudly introduced the selected construction company. Holloway Construction Services. Michael immediately recognized the name. Another family business. Public records later confirmed it belonged to Richard's oldest son. The room applauded politely. Few residents seemed aware of the connection. Michael waited patiently. When homeowner questions opened, several people asked about project timelines and parking changes. No one mentioned the contractor. Finally, Michael politely requested information regarding the bidding process. The room grew unusually quiet. Richard smiled calmly before explaining that every legal requirement had been satisfied, and the selected company represented the best value for the community. No documents were shown. No bid comparisons were presented. The meeting quickly moved to the next agenda item. Michael noticed something interesting. Several board members avoided eye contact. One appeared visibly uncomfortable. Another shuffled papers without looking up. The behavior lingered in Michael's mind long after the meeting ended. Outside the clubhouse, homeowners gathered in small groups. Most praised the renovation. Others quietly admitted the assessment fee seemed excessive. One elderly resident, George Ellis, approached Michael after recognizing his questions during the meeting. George had lived in Silver Oak since the first homes were built. His voice carried years of quiet frustration. Without making accusations, George described a pattern. Every large HOA project somehow benefited someone connected to Richard. Residents occasionally questioned it. Nothing ever changed. People eventually stopped asking. Those who pushed too hard often found themselves receiving unusually frequent violation notices. George admitted he had once requested copies of contractor evaluations. The request disappeared into months of delays before finally being denied because the records were supposedly confidential business information. That explanation had never felt right. Michael thanked him but remained cautious. Stories alone weren't evidence. Still, the pattern kept growing. Over the following weeks, Michael reviewed publicly available records. Building permits, business registrations, county tax filings. Everything confirmed the same network of relationships. Nearly every major vendor shared either family ties or long-standing business partnerships with Richard Holloway. Coincidence became increasingly difficult to believe. One afternoon, while walking his dog, Michael noticed several expensive landscaping trucks parked beside the community entrance. Workers appeared to be replacing flowers that looked perfectly healthy. Across the street, cracked sidewalks reported by residents months earlier remained untouched. Michael checked the project notice. The flower replacement alone exceeded $30,000. The neglected sidewalks posed actual safety hazards. Priorities seemed strangely misplaced. That evening, another envelope arrived from the HOA. It announced a special homeowners meeting to formally approve the million-dollar clubhouse renovation. Voting would occur in only 5 days. Attached documents contained glossy architectural drawings. Missing entirely were contractor comparisons, cost analyses, alternative proposals, conflict of interest disclosures. Michael's concern deepened. Professional experience told him one thing above all else. Legitimate organizations welcome transparency. Only organizations with something to hide feared questions. The following morning, Michael visited the county records office to verify one final detail. He requested ownership records for Holloway Construction Services. The clerk returned with several documents. Michael reviewed them carefully. His heartbeat slowed. The company had been registered only 4 months earlier, just weeks before the HOA announced the renovation project. It possessed no documented history of large-scale construction, no previous million-dollar projects, no meaningful experience managing developments of that size. Yet somehow, it had already secured the largest contract in Silver Oak history. Michael walked back to his car, carrying copies of the records. As he opened the driver's door, he noticed a folded piece of paper tucked beneath his windshield wiper. There was no envelope, no signature, only a single handwritten sentence. If you want the truth about Richard's family, don't let them approve the renovation. Michael slowly looked around the nearly empty parking lot. Whoever had left the message was gone. But someone inside Silver Oak clearly knew far more than they were willing to say publicly. And for the first time since moving into the neighborhood, Michael realized that what appeared to be simple favoritism might actually be something much bigger. The clubhouse renovation wasn't just another contract. It could be the key to exposing years of hidden nepotism that had quietly controlled Silver Oak estates. Michael Thompson could not stop thinking about the anonymous note tucked beneath his windshield wiper. The message had been brief, but it carried the unmistakable weight of someone who knew the truth and feared saying it openly. He resisted the urge to act impulsively. Throughout his career, Michael had learned that corruption rarely revealed itself through one dramatic discovery. It usually surfaced through dozens of small details that, when connected, formed an undeniable picture. The next morning, he organized every document he had collected. On one side of his desk sat the HOA financial reports. On the other were county business registrations, contractor records, tax filings, and meeting minutes. A blank legal pad rested in the center. He began drawing connections. Richard Holloway, his brother, his son, his nephew, his cousin, his sister-in-law. By noon, a web of names stretched across several pages. Nearly every major service provided to Silver Oak estates flowed through someone connected to Richard's family. Landscaping, security, road maintenance, holiday decorating, tree removal, pool maintenance. Even the company responsible for printing HOA newsletters had ties to one of Richard's longtime business partners. Individually, none of those relationships proved wrongdoing. Collectively, they painted a troubling picture. Michael decided to attend the special homeowners meeting before reaching any conclusions. 5 days later, the Silver Oak Clubhouse filled with residents eager to hear more about the proposed renovation. The atmosphere felt unusually optimistic. Large posters displayed luxurious architectural renderings. Digital presentations showcased upgraded fitness rooms, elegant lounges, and outdoor entertainment areas. Everything looked impressive. Richard stood confidently at the front of the room, presenting the renovation as a once-in-a-generation investment. The estimated cost remained just over $1 million. The funding would come directly from homeowners through a special assessment spread over 2 years. Few people seemed happy about paying more. Many believed they had little choice. Michael watched carefully. He noticed something missing. No representative from Holloway Construction Services attended the meeting. No architect answered technical questions. No independent consultant explained the cost estimates. Only Richard spoke. When homeowners asked whether competing contractors had submitted bids, Richard responded with broad statements about selecting the most qualified team. Again, no documentation appeared. Michael politely requested access to the bid comparison reports before any vote took place. Several homeowners nodded in agreement. The room grew noticeably quieter. Richard smiled, thanked Michael for his interest, and assured everyone that all legal procedures had been followed. Then the discussion quickly shifted toward landscaping improvements. The contractor question disappeared. The meeting ended with the vote postponed for 1 week. Officially, the delay allowed residents additional time to review project materials. Unofficially, Michael suspected the board needed time to prepare. The following afternoon, another unexpected opportunity arrived. George Ellis invited Michael to his home. George's garage contained dozens of neatly labeled storage boxes, dating back nearly 15 years. Inside were old newsletters, annual budgets, meeting agendas, election notices, committee assignments, and newsletters that many residents had long forgotten. George had never intended to become the neighborhood historian. He simply disliked throwing away paperwork. Together, they spent hours comparing records. An unmistakable pattern emerged. Years earlier, contractor selections had been handled by volunteer committees made up of homeowners with relevant experience. Gradually, those committees disappeared. The board assumed complete authority. Shortly afterward, Richard's relatives began winning nearly every major contract. Coincidence became increasingly difficult to believe. Then George found something remarkable. An old procurement policy, adopted nearly 10 years earlier. It required every project exceeding $100,000 to receive at least 3 independent competitive bids. The current renovation project exceeded $1 million. Yet Michael had never seen evidence of multiple bids. Even more surprising, the current HOA website no longer included that procurement policy. It had quietly vanished. Michael compared the archived documents with newer versions of the governing policies. Entire sections concerning conflict of interest disclosures had disappeared over the years. The revisions carried board approval dates. No homeowner explanations accompanied the changes. That evening, Michael searched archived HOA newsletters online. Most residents ignored old newsletters. Michael read every edition. A short article published 6 years earlier caught his attention. It celebrated the appointment of Richard's nephew to oversee neighborhood security upgrades. The article described him as bringing fresh leadership despite having no previous security management experience. Another newsletter announced Richard's brother's landscaping company receiving recognition for years of exceptional service. Every story praised family businesses. None disclosed family relationships. Transparency had quietly been replaced by carefully crafted public relations. As Michael continued reviewing records, Sarah noticed something else. Nearly every board member who served alongside Richard for long periods had eventually resigned. Their replacements shared one thing in common. Most had either business relationships with Richard or social ties, extending back many years. Fresh perspectives rarely reach the board. The same circle simply expanded. The next morning, Michael received an email from an unfamiliar address. There was no greeting, no signature, only one sentence. Look at the clubhouse engineering inspection. Attached was a scan report. Michael verified its authenticity through the county permit office. The report had been completed only 8 months earlier. Its conclusion surprised him. The clubhouse remained structurally excellent. Routine maintenance was recommended. No major renovation appeared necessary. Estimated maintenance costs totaled less than $70,000. The proposed million-dollar project suddenly seemed impossible to justify. Michael immediately requested copies of the engineering report from the HOA. The response arrived within hours. The association claimed no such report existed. That answer concerned Michael more than the report itself. Someone inside the organization had either hidden the inspection or hoped homeowners would never discover it. Word quietly spread among a handful of trusted residents. Rebecca Lawson, a retired attorney. Angela Morris, a certified public accountant. David Chen, a licensed structural engineer. Each volunteered to review different portions of the available records. Their findings matched Michael's growing concerns. Angela discovered unusual payment increases awarded to family-owned vendors almost every year. David confirmed that many renovation items described as urgent showed no visible signs of deterioration. Rebecca identified several potential governance violations involving conflicts of interest. Individually, each finding raised questions. Together, they suggested a deeply rooted system that favored one family over the community. The group agreed on one principle. No accusations would be made without evidence. Everything would be documented carefully. Everything would remain factual. As homeowners prepared for the final approval meeting, something unexpected happened. Violation notices began arriving. George received a warning about mailbox paint. Angela was cited for supposedly overgrown shrubs. David received a parking violation, despite parking legally inside his own driveway. Michael himself was notified that his garage door had remained open for excessive periods. Security camera footage proved otherwise. The timing felt impossible to ignore. Residents quietly supporting transparency were suddenly experiencing unusual scrutiny. Fear began spreading once again. Some homeowners withdrew their support. Others stopped attending meetings altogether. Richard appeared more confident than ever. The renovation vote approached rapidly. Then, 2 nights before the scheduled approval, Michael returned home after dinner to find another anonymous envelope resting inside his mailbox. This one contained far more than a handwritten note. Inside lay several photocopied invoices, bank transfer summaries, email headers, and one folded document stamped *confidential. Michael's hands trembled slightly as he unfolded the final page. Across the top appeared the title, Preferred Vendor Selection Committee. Below the heading was a list of evaluation scores, supposedly comparing competing construction companies. Only one problem immediately stood out. Every competing contractor, except Holloway Construction, had been disqualified before price evaluations even began. Some companies had never even submitted complete proposals. Others listed on the document later confirmed through public records that they had never bid on the project at all. The scoring sheet appeared to have been created only to justify a decision already made. At the bottom of the final page sat a signature. Not Richard Holloway's, but someone even more important, the HOA's legal advisor. If authentic, the document suggested that multiple people, not just Richard, had participated in creating the appearance of a fair bidding process. Michael carefully placed every document back into the envelope. He realized the coming board meeting would no longer be about questioning one suspicious contract. It would become a fight over whether an entire system built on favoritism and family loyalty could survive the truth. Michael Thompson barely slept the night before the final HOA meeting. The anonymous documents spread across his dining room table represented years of careful planning by someone determined to expose the truth. Every invoice, financial record, contractor evaluation, engineering report, and archived policy had been organized into a clear timeline. Nothing was based on rumors. Nothing relied on assumptions. Every claim could be verified. Sarah watched quietly as Michael prepared copies of the evidence. She knew her husband wasn't trying to embarrass anyone. Throughout his career, he had believed that transparency protected honest people just as much as it exposed dishonest ones. If Richard Holloway had followed proper procedures, the documents would prove it. If he hadn't, the homeowners deserved to know. The clubhouse reached full capacity long before the meeting officially began. For the first time in years, nearly every chair was occupied. Residents stood along the walls. Neighbors who had rarely attended meetings now filled every available space. Many had heard whispers that important information would be presented. Others simply wanted answers about the million-dollar renovation. Richard Holloway entered with the same confidence he had displayed for over a decade. He greeted homeowners with polished smiles. The board members took their seats beside him. Stacks of renovation packets rested neatly on every table. Everything appeared ready for another routine approval. Richard opened the meeting by praising Silver Oak Estates for remaining one of the county's finest communities. He highlighted rising property values, beautiful landscaping, and successful neighborhood events. Then he introduced the motion to approve the clubhouse renovation. Before voting could begin, Michael stood. The room became silent. Unlike previous meetings, homeowners were no longer surprised to see him asking questions. Richard acknowledged him with visible hesitation. Michael thanked the board for allowing him to speak. He remained calm, respectful, professional. He explained that he fully supported improving the neighborhood, but only through transparent and ethical decision-making. Then he began presenting facts. He displayed the archived procurement policy, requiring multiple competitive bids for large contracts. Next came the engineering inspection, confirming the clubhouse required routine maintenance rather than a million-dollar reconstruction. David Chen, the licensed structural engineer, independently verified the report's conclusions. Angela Morris summarized the financial analysis. Over the past 12 years, more than 60% of major HOA contracts had been awarded to businesses owned by Richard's immediate family or close relatives. The figures were supported by county business registrations, not opinions. Public records. Rebecca Lawson reviewed the HOA's governing documents. She pointed to conflict of interest provisions that required board members to disclose personal relationships before voting on contracts involving relatives. Meeting minutes contained no such disclosures. Then Michael presented the contractor evaluation sheet, anonymously delivered to him. He carefully explained that the document itself required independent verification. However, he had already contacted several construction companies listed as unsuccessful bidders. 2 companies provided sworn written statements confirming they had never submitted proposals for the Silver Oak renovation. Another confirmed receiving no invitation to bid at all. The supposed competitive process had serious unanswered questions. The atmosphere inside the clubhouse changed instantly. Homeowners who had remained silent for years began reviewing the copies distributed throughout the room. Whispers spread from one table to another. Board members looked increasingly uncomfortable. Richard attempted to dismiss the information as misunderstandings and incomplete records. But every explanation raised new questions. One homeowner asked why family relationships had never been disclosed. Another questioned why the engineering inspection had been withheld. Several demanded access to all contractor bids. Others requested an immediate independent audit. For the first time in many years, Richard no longer controlled the conversation. Then something completely unexpected happened. One board member slowly stood. His name was Thomas Reed. He had served beside Richard for nearly 7 years. Thomas admitted that he had trusted Richard's recommendations without personally reviewing every contract. He confessed that most procurement decisions had been presented to the board as completed recommendations requiring only formal approval. Another board member followed. Then another. None accused Richard of criminal conduct. Instead, they admitted the board had become too dependent on one individual. Oversight had gradually disappeared. Questions had stopped being asked. Convenience had replaced accountability. The homeowners listened in stunned silence. The foundation of Richard's leadership was collapsing, not through dramatic accusations, but through simple admissions that proper governance had failed. Within hours, an emergency motion passed overwhelmingly. The $1 million renovation was suspended. An independent accounting firm would conduct a complete financial audit. All contracts involving businesses connected to board members would be reviewed. Future procurement would require independent homeowner committees. Conflict of interest disclosures would become mandatory before every major vote. Richard remained seated throughout the proceedings. The confidence that had defined his leadership slowly disappeared. Over the following weeks, independent auditors examined more than a decade of financial records. Their report reached several important conclusions. Most completed projects had actually been performed. Money had not simply vanished. However, procurement procedures had repeatedly failed to meet accepted governance standards. Competitive bidding had often been poorly documented. Conflict of interest disclosures were incomplete or entirely absent. Several contracts awarded to relatives exceeded reasonable market prices. The audit concluded that homeowners had likely paid hundreds of thousands of dollars more than necessary because genuine competition had not occurred. The findings triggered additional legal and regulatory reviews. Rather than endure prolonged investigations and removal proceedings, Richard Holloway resigned as HOA president. Several longtime board members also stepped down. Holloway Construction Services voluntarily withdrew from the clubhouse project. The renovation was reopened through a fully transparent bidding process. This time, 12 independent companies submitted proposals. The winning contractor had no relationship with any board member. Its final bid came in nearly $400,000 lower than Richard's family company. The savings allowed the HOA to cancel the planned special assessment entirely. Instead of raising dues, the community completed essential improvements while preserving its financial reserves. Residents could hardly believe the difference. For the first time in years, every contract summary was published online. Board meetings were live-streamed. Financial statements included detailed explanations. Independent volunteers observed every major vote. No single family-controlled committees. No contractor received automatic preference. Michael repeatedly declined requests to run for HOA president. He believed healthy communities depended on systems, not heroes. Instead, he accepted a volunteer position leading the newly established Ethics and Procurement Committee. Its responsibility was simple: ensure every homeowner received fairness, not favoritism. George Ellis finally experienced something he had almost stopped believing possible. HOA meetings became places where questions were welcomed instead of discouraged. New residents joined committees. Retired professionals shared their expertise. Younger families felt their opinions mattered. Silver Oak Estates remained one of the county's most beautiful neighborhoods. But its greatest improvement could not be measured by landscaping, property values, or elegant homes. It was measured by trust. Trust that contracts would be earned, not inherited. Trust that leadership served the community instead of one family. Trust that transparency protected everyone equally. Months later, Michael often thought about the anonymous envelopes that had started everything. No one ever discovered who had delivered them. Perhaps it was an employee who could no longer stay silent. Perhaps a board member burdened by guilt. Perhaps a contractor who believed honest competition deserved another chance. The identity never mattered. What mattered was the courage behind the decision. Because real change rarely begins with loud speeches. It begins when one honest person refuses to accept that this is how it's always been. And when ordinary people choose integrity over convenience, even the strongest family empire built on favoritism eventually falls.